My parents always told me I was adopted after my real mom died. But when I found a dusty journal in our attic, written in broken English by the woman who raised me, I realized the truth was way darker. My adoptive parents weren't just keeping a secret, they stole me. They told me I was adopted. They told me my mother died in childbirth. But they never told me I'd been raised by the woman they took everything from. Hi, I'm Sienna Evans, 22 years old. I grew up in a quiet suburb in Portland, Oregon, in a big colonial house with white shutters and a red front door. The kind of place that looked perfect on the outside, like something out of a Christmas movie. But perfection has layers. And some of those layers hide the ugliest truths. It started on a Tuesday. I was packing boxes for my move to graduate school. My adoptive mom, Janice, was at a book club meeting. My dad, Roger, was on a work trip in D.C. I had the whole house to myself. While rummaging through the attic, I found an old dusty cardboard box. It had kitchen, donate scribbled in faded Sharpie. But it was too heavy for old spatulas. Inside was a stack of mismatched linens, yellowed recipes, and at the very bottom, a leather-bound notebook. It smelled like cinnamon and age. When I opened the first page, my heart skipped. It wasn't in English. Or not fully, anyway. It read, 1999, today, baby Sia laugh at me when I wear spoon on head. She call me silly. My angel. My baby. I blinked. Sia? No one ever called me that, except Mila. Mila was my nanny, or so I was told. She was in my life from the moment I was brought home from the hospital until I was around 7. She had a thick Eastern European accent, soft hands, and a gentle way of speaking that always made me feel safe. I remembered she sang lullabies I didn't understand, cooked soup when I was sick, and kept a gold cross tucked in her bra. I remember crying when she left. I remember my parents saying she had to go back home one night, suddenly. I never saw her again. Back to the attic. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages. More entries followed. They say I cannot keep her. That I don't have papers. But she mine. My blood. They say sign the paper or go away. I want her safe. I sign. My lungs tightened. My throat dried. Was she talking about me? I read on. The handwriting got shakier. The grammar more broken. But the emotion bled through every word. I not give her up. I raise her. They say I just help. I do all. I feed, I sing, I kiss boo-boo. But they not let her call me mama. I slammed the journal shut. It couldn't be. My parents adopted me from a private agency. I was born in California. My biological mother died, right? That's what I'd been told. But this journal, was Mila saying I wasn't adopted through an agency? That I'd been taken from her? I rushed downstairs, flipped open my baby book. Hospital bracelet, birth photo. All generic. No mother's name. Just baby girl, May 5th, 2002. I felt dizzy. Everything in my life, my name, my memories, my identity, started to blur. And then I saw it. Inside the journal's back pocket was a Polaroid photo. A woman, young, tired, smiling, holding a newborn. Her face was familiar. It was Mila. And the baby had my exact birthmark. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, clutching the journal to my chest. Was my entire life a lie? Had I been raised by my real mother, while being told she was just the help? And if Mila was my mother, where was she now? Small orange diamond. I couldn't sleep. That night, I kept rereading the journal, flipping back to that one line again and again. They say sign the paper or go away. I want her safe. I sign. Who made her sign? What did she sign? And why was none of this in my adoption records? At 3:17 a.m., I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched her name. Mila Dragovic. Most results were generic immigration records, recipes, archived travel documents. But one link caught my eye, an old employment application filed in Oregon in 2006. The contact number was outdated, but the address was still listed. Crescent Grove Assisted Living Facility, just 40 minutes from me. My heart skipped. Could she still be there? The next morning, I drove to the facility. The sky was gray. Oregon rain drizzled on my windshield like tiny fingers tapping. Are you sure? I wasn't. I walked in, clutching the journal tight to my chest like it might collapse without it. The receptionist looked up. Can I help you? I'm looking for someone who might have lived or worked here. Mila Dragovic. She blinked. Tapped a few keys. Mila Dragovic? Yes. She was a resident. Moved here in 2019. Passed away in April. My breath left me. I stood there, blinking, trying to process. Did she leave any belongings? I asked, barely whispering. The woman nodded. We have a box in storage. Next of kin never claimed it. You'd need to speak with Ms. Carter, our director. 30 minutes later, I was seated in a small office, staring at a cardboard box with the name Mila D written in thick Sharpie. Ms. Carter, a warm woman in her 50s, handed it to me gently. She didn't talk much. Wrote letters. Journaled a lot. Talked about a daughter once, said she lost her. I opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were a worn photograph of me, maybe 3 years old, on a swing. A pressed daisy in a clear envelope. A letter. Sealed. It was addressed to my angel, Sia, if you ever find me. My Sia. If you read this, it means you found my words. You were always smart. They said I was only nanny. But you were not just job to me. You were mine. I had you in place where I could not keep you. I tried. I held you in arms, I fed you with love, but people with paper and money said no. Underscore. I signed. Not because I didn't love, but because they said you would have better life. Big house. Schools. I didn't have anything. They said nanny is best I can be. So I stayed. I watched you grow. I sang songs. I kissed your head. But I never got to say mama. Then they sent me away. No goodbye. No hug. Just gone. I tried to find you. But they changed names. Closed doors. So I wrote. Every day. Because maybe someday you'd find me. I hope you know I love you. Always. Even when I could not stay. Mila, you're always mama. I cried. Right there in that little office, with Miss Carter quietly handing me tissues, I wept for a woman who'd given up everything, but still tried to leave breadcrumbs. She hadn't abandoned me. She had fought for me. And I had no idea. That night, I sat in my car for hours outside the house I grew up in, gripping the letter in my lap. I didn't go in. I couldn't look my adoptive parents in the eye. Not yet. They had lied. Maybe not with words, but with what they chose not to say. With how they erased a woman who had been my world. And suddenly, everything about my childhood started making sense. The way I always cried when Mila left the room. The way I clung to the lullaby she used to hum. The way I'd call for Mama in the middle of the night, and it wasn't Janice. I thought about leaving a note and disappearing. But then I remembered what Mila did. She stayed. She did the hard thing. And now, I had to do the same. Small orange diamond. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either, not the same way I did at the facility. This time it was different. This was rage. Sad, aching, tightly wound rage. I sat in my old room the next morning, waiting. The sun crept across my carpet like it always had when I was a teenager, but everything felt different now. I heard the front door open. My adoptive mom called up the stairs. Sia, we brought breakfast. Like it was any normal Sunday. I walked down, journal and letter in hand. My dad was pouring orange juice. My mom was unwrapping muffins. They looked up and froze. I placed the journal between them on the kitchen island. We need to talk. My mom blinked. My dad cleared his throat. Okay. Who was Mila? I asked, voice tight. And don't say the nanny. Not after this. I held up the letter. My mom's face crumbled first. She looked away. My father went pale. Sia, she began, but I held up a hand. She raised me. She called me her angel. And you told me she left because she got a job in another state. Why did you lie? There was silence. Then finally, my father said, "We didn't think you'd ever know." So it's true? I said. She was my biological mother? My mom looked at me then, fully, honestly, and nodded. Yes. They explained. At least, the version they chose to tell. Mila had immigrated under a temporary status. When she became pregnant, she was undocumented, alone, and desperate. My adoptive parents had struggled to conceive. They were wealthy, respected, connected. They offered to help, which meant they would raise me as their own, and Mila would remain as the nanny until it became too risky to keep her around. She agreed, my mother said. No, I snapped. She signed because you threatened to take me and deport her. They didn't argue. They just looked ashamed. My father leaned forward. Sia, we gave you everything. That did it. You gave me everything, except the truth. Except the woman who loved me before I could speak. You stole her. My mother started crying. I didn't comfort her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their daughter. She died alone, I said softly. In a facility. Writing letters to a child she hoped might find her. We thought it was best, my dad said. Best for who? They couldn't answer. Then came the part I'll never forget. My mom looked at me, voice trembling. Please don't tell anyone. Your dad's up for a position on the hospital board. This could ruin everything. That's when I knew they hadn't raised me out of love. They had raised me out of convenience. Out of image. And even now, they cared more about their status than the damage they had done. I walked out. I didn't go back for weeks. They called. Texted. Sent flowers. I ignored it all. I stayed with a friend across town, and every night I reread Mila's letter like a prayer. She didn't have much. But what she gave me, the early memories, the love, the lullabies, that was more real than anything my adoptive parents had given me. One night, I went to a tattoo shop and had a single word inked on my wrist. Angel. Her word for me. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a church in southeast Portland. A tiny Croatian parish. I found it mentioned once in Mila's notes. The priest remembered her. Mila? Yes. She used to come light candles every Sunday. Sat in the last pew. Always cried during the music. I asked if I could leave something behind. He nodded. I placed her photo, the one of me on the swing, beneath the Virgin Mary statue. Tucked inside a frame of pressed daisy petals. Thank you, I whispered. I didn't forgive my adoptive parents. But I did write them a letter. You raised me. And for that, I survived. But I won't pretend anymore. I am who I am because of Mila. And I will not erase her so you can sleep better at night. A month later, I filed paperwork to petition for a name addition. Not to replace Sia, but to honor the woman who gave me that name first. Now, my full name reads Sia Mila Donovan. And one day, if I have a daughter, I'll tell her the truth. All of it. Small orange diamond. It had been a year since I found the journal. A year since I confronted my adoptive parents. A year since I finally began to understand who I really was. And still, there were moments when I would wake up, my head spinning with memories I had never asked for, memories I couldn't erase, memories of a woman I never knew. But even in those moments, I knew I had to keep going. I stood on the cobblestone streets of Zagreb, the Croatian city where Mila had once lived. Her name echoed in my mind like a prayer. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but something inside me told me that I needed to be here, to be where she had come from, where she had tried to create a life before everything had fallen apart. The air was different here. There was something lighter, freer. As if this city, with its narrow alleys and hidden courtyards, held secrets of its own. I made my way through the maze of old streets, clinging to the envelope of Mila's letters like they were a lifeline. The priest had told me about her family, a small, poor village north of the city, somewhere near the border. I had spent the last few weeks tracking down her roots, her childhood, her family. I arrived at the village in the late afternoon, just as the sun began to dip behind the hills. The village was quiet, the way a town seems when everyone has already gone home for the evening. It was peaceful here, in a way I had never experienced before. I knocked on the door of the small cottage at the end of the street. An elderly woman answered, her face lined with the marks of years spent under the sun. "Can I help you?" she asked. I hesitated, wondering how to ask. She wasn't just a stranger. She was my blood. But I wasn't sure how to introduce myself. How to tell her I was the child of the woman she had lost long ago. "I'm looking for Mila," I said softly. Her eyes clouded with sadness. "Mila? My daughter, she left many years ago." My heart skipped. You're her mother?" I asked, barely able to speak. The woman nodded. "Yes, I am. But she never came back." I sank onto the nearest chair, feeling a deep, aching sorrow. Mila's mother. I had just found her, and now, the truth seemed like a dream I couldn't wake from. "I'm Sia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm her daughter." The words hung in the air. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tears began to fall. We talked for hours that evening. She showed me old photographs of Mila, a young woman with bright eyes and a shy smile. Her mother spoke of the dreams Mila had, how she wanted to create a family, build a life. But those dreams had been shattered when she'd had to leave. When I told her about how Mila had raised me, about the love she had given me, the woman took my hands in hers. "She loved you," she whispered. "She always loved you." I knew she did. But I had no way of telling you. It was then that I realized, this woman, the stranger who had once been my mother's mother, had been carrying the same sorrow I had carried for so long. The sorrow of a family torn apart by circumstances neither of us could control. The next day, we went to the local cemetery, where Mila was buried. She had died young, her life cut short by the weight of the world. And as I stood there, I realized that I had found the missing piece of my soul. I had found my roots. I had found Mila's family. And for the first time in my life, I felt at peace. As the days passed, I spent time with Mila's family. They welcomed me with open arms, though it was clear that the wounds of the past were still there. But in their eyes, I saw the same warmth, the same love Mila had shown me all those years ago. I stayed in the village for a week, learning about Mila's life, her struggles, and her dreams. I visited the places she had once walked, stood where she had once stood, and for the first time, I felt connected to something deeper than just the life I had known. Before I left, I went to the village church where Mila had once prayed. The priest there remembered her too. And I knew that part of her still lived in these people, in this land, in this place. "Mila's spirit is here," the priest said to me. "She will never be forgotten." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. I left Croatia a changed person. I returned to the US, but I wasn't the same. The pieces of my past were no longer just stories or memories. They were living, breathing parts of who I was. I had found my mother's roots. And in doing so, I had found the strength to carry on. The flight back to the United States was quiet. I sat by the window, looking out at the clouds, thinking about Mila, my mother, and the village she left behind. I could still feel the grip of her mother's hands, hear the way she whispered my name like a prayer she thought would never be answered. For the first time, I felt whole. Not because everything had been fixed, but because I finally knew. Knew where I came from. Knew why she left. Knew what she sacrificed so I could have a different life. And now it was my turn to build something from that truth. When I returned, my adoptive parents were waiting at the airport. We hadn't spoken much since my discovery. They knew I had gone searching. I think part of them feared I wouldn't return, or that I'd come back and never look at them the same again. And I didn't. But not in the way they feared. I met her mother, I said after we got in the car. I stood by her grave. I read every letter she ever wrote. They didn't interrupt. They just listened. You took me in. You loved me. But you also took away my right to know the truth. And I'll never understand why. Silence. Then, my mom, the woman who had raised me, spoke. Because we were scared. Because we thought we could erase the past if we just gave you a future. But that was selfish. Her voice broke. I'm sorry, Sia. Truly. I nodded. I forgive you. But I need space to build my own story now. And that's what I did. I moved to a new city. Got a small apartment. Took a job at a nonprofit that helped immigrant women, a cause I knew Mila would have cared deeply about. I started journaling again. Writing everything down, just like Mila had done. It felt like our stories were finally being written side by side, even if time had kept us apart. 3 months into this new life, I received an email. The subject line read, I think I might be your brother. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding. Could it be? His name was Leo. He said he had been placed in foster care as a baby, born in the same town where Mila had lived. He had never been adopted, but he had recently gone looking for information about his birth mother. A DNA service matched him to me. I clicked reply with trembling fingers. Let's talk. A week later, we met in person. He looked like Mila. Same eyes. Same nose. Same tilt to the mouth when he smiled nervously. We talked for hours about our lives, our losses, the families we ended up with, and the ones we never got to know. He'd had it harder than I did. He'd bounced between homes, aged out of the system, and fought his way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. But he was strong. Resilient. You remind me of her, I told him. You are her, in so many ways. He smiled at that. Then so are you. The day we visited Mila's grave together, it rained softly. We stood side by side, holding umbrellas, saying nothing at first. Then Leo pulled out a single red rose and placed it on her headstone. She never got to see us together, he said quietly. But I hope she knows now. I nodded, tears falling freely. We found each other, Leo. That's what matters. In the months that followed, we built a bond. We weren't just siblings, we were survivors of a story that could have broken us but didn't. Leo moved to my city. We started a small podcast together, Mila's Kids, where we shared stories of displaced families, lost roots, and reconnection. It grew quickly. People connected with it, with us. One day, we received a message from a woman in Croatia. She had known Mila in school. She always wanted to be a writer, the woman said. She said she had stories inside her that no one would believe. And now, here we were, telling those stories. A few months later, I received a package from Croatia. Inside was a small, delicate envelope with my name handwritten across it. It was Mila's final letter, one she had written shortly before she died, but that had never been mailed. My Sia. If you ever read this, it means you found your way back to me somehow. I don't know what your life looks like, who raised you, or what name you go by now. But I pray you are loved. I pray you are free. I never wanted to leave you, not really. But the world forced my hand, and I was too young, too afraid, too alone. You are the best part of my story. And even if my name disappears in time, I hope you know that your existence was the reason I kept going as long as I did. You are everything I ever hoped you'd be. Love. Mila. I wept. Not just for her, but for every girl who had ever been forced to bury her dreams so someone else could live theirs. Today, I sit at my desk, a mother now myself, a writer, a daughter twice over. And I think of Mila. Of her strength. Her heartbreak. Her hope. I tell her story every chance I get. Because she deserves to be remembered not just as a name in a file, but as a woman who loved fiercely, lost tragically, and still left behind something beautiful. Me. Leo. Us. You can survive being forgotten, but being found again, that's where the healing begins.